The silk of my dress felt alien against my skin, a shimmering cage holding in the frantic beat of my heart. It was supposed to be the happiest day of my life. Standing at the altar, gazing at Liam's dark, handsome face, I almost believed it. The church was beautiful, overflowing with flowers and filled with the murmurs of our loved ones. Ours. Finally, we were ours. Liam's hand was warm, solid in mine as we said our vows. His eyes, usually playful and light, were serious, filled with a depth of emotion that mirrored my own. He promised forever, and for a fleeting moment, I dared to dream of a life free from the shadows that had always clung to the edges of his world. Shadows cast by his mother, Eleanor. Eleanor. Just the name tasted like ash in my mouth. She'd made her dislike for me abundantly clear from day one. Too common, she'd called me to Liam when she thought I wasn't listening. Not good enough for her precious boy. I'd gritted my teeth through countless passive-aggressive comments, forced smiles at family gatherings, and endured her constant criticisms of my career, my clothes, my everything. I had hoped, foolishly perhaps, that our wedding day might be a truce, a chance for her to finally accept me. The reception was a blur of congratulations, forced smiles, and stolen moments with Liam. We danced, we laughed, we cut the cake. I tried to ignore Eleanor's sharp gaze following me across the room. I told myself it didn't matter. Today was about Liam and me. Today we were impenetrable. Then she grabbed the microphone. A sickening premonition twisted in my stomach as Eleanor, draped in a hideous emerald green dress, her signature color of malice, tapped the microphone, her eyes gleaming with a poisonous light. A hush fell over the room. "I have a little surprise for the happy couple," she announced, her voice dripping with saccharine sweetness that made my teeth ache. I decided to do something special for my darling Liam, because he deserves the absolute best. The room tittered nervously. I looked at Liam, searching for a sign that this was some kind of elaborate, albeit misguided, gesture of goodwill. His face was pale, his jaw clenched. He knew. "I've gone ahead and canceled their honeymoon." The words hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. A wave of nausea washed over me. I forced a laugh, a desperate attempt to play it off. "Very funny, Eleanor," I managed, my voice trembling slightly. Her smile widened, a grotesque parody of warmth. "Oh, I'm not joking, darling. Why waste all that money on a frivolous trip when Liam has real responsibilities? That money is much better spent on family, on me." The blood drained from my face. I felt like I was drowning, gasping for air in a vacuum of disbelief. "Tell me this isn't real," I whispered to Liam, my voice barely audible. He didn't answer. He pulled out his phone, his face grim, and checked his bank account. The silence stretched, thick and agonizing. His knuckles turned white as he gripped the phone. "My account. It's empty," he muttered, his voice raw with disbelief. Eleanor stood there, basking in the horrified silence, a triumphant smirk playing on her lips. The world spun. I reached for my own phone, my fingers numb with fear, and logged into my banking app. The numbers swam before my eyes, confirming my worst nightmare. The honeymoon fund, the money we had meticulously saved, the generous gifts from our friends and family, gone. All of it wiped clean. My vision blurred. Everything seemed to fade into a muffled, distorted nightmare. The scent of the flowers, the murmur of the guests, Eleanor's smug face, all amplified, grotesque. The perfect day, the beautiful lie, had shattered into a million jagged pieces. Cold. I was so incredibly cold. The champagne flute slipped from my nerveless fingers, shattering on the floor, the sound lost in the ringing in my ears. It felt symbolic. Our shattered dreams scattered on the floor, impossible to piece back together. Thousands of dollars. Thousands! We had dreamt of exploring the sun-drenched beaches of Santorini, of losing ourselves in the vibrant markets of Marrakech, of finally, truly being alone, away from Eleanor's suffocating presence. Now, all that was gone, stolen by the one person who should have been celebrating our happiness. Liam's silence was deafening. He stood frozen, staring at his mother with an expression I had never seen before, a mixture of disbelief, disgust, and something that looked dangerously like rage. I wanted to scream, to lash out, to claw Eleanor's eyes out, but I was paralyzed, trapped in a nightmare I couldn't escape. Eleanor, oblivious to the devastation she had wrought, continued her twisted justification. "Stop being dramatic, Liam," she scoffed, waving a dismissive hand. "I simply transferred the money where it belonged, to family. You're a married man now. It's time to grow up and take care of your responsibilities." Responsibilities? What about our responsibilities to each other? What about the dreams we had shared, the future we had planned? Was all that meaningless to her? "Where is the money, Eleanor?" Liam finally spoke, his voice low and dangerous. Eleanor feigned innocence. "In my account, of course. I needed it for some very important things. The audacity, the sheer, unadulterated gall. I couldn't breathe. "You stole our honeymoon money?" I said, my voice trembling with fury. Eleanor laughed, a sharp, cruel sound. "Stole? Don't be ridiculous, darling. That money should be used for something responsible, like your husband supporting his mother. I raised him. I deserve it." Deserve? She deserved to steal our dreams? To sabotage our marriage before it even began? Liam pulled out a chair and sat down, his elbows resting on the table, his gaze fixed on his mother. He looked calm, almost unnaturally so. It was a calm that terrified me more than any outburst. "Tell me exactly what you spent our money on, Eleanor." Eleanor beamed, apparently mistaking his composure for acceptance. She launched into a detailed account of her spending spree, paying off credit card bills, putting a deposit on a luxury SUV, booking a penthouse suite on a cruise for herself. Each word was a fresh wound, twisting the knife deeper into my heart. She had replaced our dreams with her own selfish desires, without a second thought for the pain she was inflicting. Liam listened in silence, his fingers tapping lightly against the table. Then he smiled, a cold, predatory smile that sent a shiver down my spine. "That's great, Eleanor," he said softly. "That's really, really great." Eleanor hesitated, sensing a shift in the atmosphere. What do you mean?" "I mean, it's great that you spent money that wasn't yours," Liam continued, his voice laced with steel. "Because you know what that means, don't you?" He pulled out his phone and dialed a number. "Yeah, hi," he said, his eyes locked on Eleanor's face. "I'd like to report fraudulent activity on my account." Eleanor's face contorted with a mixture of shock and fury. "Liam, what are you doing?" Liam ignored her. "I'd like to dispute several unauthorized transfers." "Yes, I know exactly who did it. I can give you their name and account number right now." Eleanor lunged towards him, her hand outstretched. "Liam, stop it. You can't." "Oh, I can," Liam said, his voice like ice. "See, Eleanor, you're not on my account. You don't have access to my money, which means you stole it. And banks don't like fraud." Guests were staring, recording the scene on their phones. Eleanor's face turned crimson. "I wonder how that's going to look when the bank investigates," Liam continued, his smile widening. "Oh, and I should probably call the cruise line too, since you booked that trip with stolen money." Eleanor gasped. "Liam, I'm your mother." "You wouldn't." "I would," Liam said, his voice unwavering. He turned to me, took my hand, and squeezed it tightly. Then he faced Eleanor again. "By the way, Eleanor," he said, his voice dripping with sarcasm, "you remember that prenup you told me not to sign? The one you said was insulting and a waste of time?" Eleanor blinked, her eyes widening in dawning horror. "Well," Liam continued, his smile turning predatory, "I signed it anyway." Eleanor's face froze, a mask of utter disbelief. I honestly thought she was going to faint right there on the spot. Liam shrugged, the picture of cool indifference. "And guess what?" he drawled. the words a delicious balm to my wounded soul. One of the conditions is that all our accounts remain separate, which means, he gestured towards my phone, you didn't just steal from me, Eleanor. You stole from my wife. The color completely drained from Eleanor's face. Just like that, the queen bee's reign was over. She knew she wasn't just dealing with her son anymore. She was dealing with me, and I was ready to unleash hell. Eleanor stood there, a grotesque caricature of her former self, her mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. She desperately scanned the room, searching for someone, anyone, to defend her. But all she saw was judgment, disgust, and a collective sense of satisfaction. Karma was a dish best served cold, and Eleanor was about to get a heaping plateful. Liam, sweetheart, she stammered, her voice shaking. Let's not get carried away here. But Liam was done. He put his phone on speaker, just as the bank representative came back on the line. Sir, we flagged the unauthorized transactions. Since the recipient account is under a different name, we can escalate this as fraud. Would you like us to proceed with a full investigation? Eleanor lunged for the phone, desperate to silence the damning voice. Liam, hang up! We can talk about this. Liam leaned away, his voice as sharp and unforgiving as a shard of glass. Yeah, proceed. Eleanor let out a choked gasp. You wouldn't do that to your own mother. Liam simply stared at her, his eyes devoid of warmth. You already did this to yourself, the bank rep continued, oblivious to the unfolding drama. Understood. We'll be reversing the charges and notifying authorities. This will result in a temporary freeze on the recipient account while we investigate. If this case is confirmed as fraud, legal action may be taken. Eleanor screeched, a sound that made my teeth ache. Legal action? No. Tell them to stop, Liam. Fix this. But Liam wasn't finished playing his hand. Oh no, he was just getting started. Don't worry, Eleanor, he said, his voice dripping with sarcasm. I'll make sure you don't get arrested yet, he smirked. But the money? That's gone. You won't be seeing a single cent of it. I watched, mesmerized, as Eleanor's face twisted with rage and desperation. But what she did next, no one saw it coming. With a wild look in her eyes, she turned to me, her face contorted with a mixture of hatred and desperation. This is your fault, she shrieked, her voice cracking. You poisoned my son against me. He never would have done this before you came along. I stood my ground, refusing to be intimidated. I didn't make you steal from us, Eleanor. You did that all on your own. Eleanor's eyes darted around the room, searching for support, for validation, for anything that would justify her monstrous behavior. But all she saw was disgust, pity, and a collective sense of rejoicing. The queen was dethroned, and no one was sorry to see her fall. Then, like a switch flipped in her brain, she did something that made my blood run cold. She smiled, a slow, unsettling smile that sent a shiver down my spine. Fine, she said sweetly, her voice dripping with venom. If I can't have the money, then neither can you. Before I could react, she reached into her purse, yanked out her phone, and started furiously typing. I stepped closer, my heart hammering against my ribs. What are you doing, Eleanor? Eleanor grinned wickedly, her eyes gleaming with malice. Oh, just making a little phone call, she said, her voice sickly sweet. You see, darling, I might not have access to your bank accounts anymore, but I still have a few tricks up my sleeve. She hit the call button, and when she spoke, her voice was sickeningly saccharine. Hi, yes, this is Eleanor. I need to report a stolen credit card. My stomach dropped. I knew exactly what she was doing. She was trying to sabotage us, to inflict as much pain as possible, even if it meant hurting herself in the process. She was trying to falsely report fraud on our joint wedding account, hoping to trigger a freeze on the funds, including the honeymoon money we had just recovered. I lunged forward, desperate to stop her. You psycho! But Liam was faster. He snatched the phone from her hands and put it on speaker. Ma'am, the fraud department rep said, her voice professional and detached. You are reporting a stolen card? Can you confirm the account holder's name? Eleanor paused, her mouth twitching. She glanced at me, then back at Liam, her eyes narrowed with defiance. Liam raised an eyebrow, a silent challenge. Go ahead, Eleanor. Tell them whose account you're reporting stolen. Eleanor swallowed hard, her Adam's apple bobbing nervously. Well, it's my son's account. The bank rep cut her off, her voice hardening. Ma'am, unless you are the primary account holder, you cannot report fraud on this card. False reports will result in legal consequences. Eleanor's face fell, her carefully constructed facade crumbling before our eyes. She looked around the room wildly, realizing she had just screwed herself over even more. And Liam? He just laughed, a low, slow laugh that made my heart swell with pride. Oh, Eleanor, he said, shaking his head in mock disappointment. You just can't help yourself, can you? Eleanor's face flushed a deep, furious red. She was shaking, her entire body trembling with suppressed rage. Aye, she stammered, her voice barely a whisper. Before she could utter another word, her phone buzzed. She grabbed it, glanced at the screen, and immediately went pale. Liam smirked, a predatory gleam in his eyes. That's the bank, I presume? Eleanor didn't answer. She didn't have to, because at that moment, another guest, a family friend, cleared his throat and stood up. Eleanor, he said slowly, his voice carrying through the suddenly silent room. You do realize I'm a lawyer, right? Eleanor's eyes widened, her breath catching in her throat. He crossed his arms, his expression grim. What you just did? That was attempted financial fraud. You literally did it in front of 50 people. A murmur rippled through the crowd. A few guests nodded in agreement, their faces a mixture of shock and satisfaction. Eleanor staggered back, her hand flying to her mouth. I wasn't. The lawyer raised a hand, cutting her off. Save it. You might want to get ahead of this before it gets worse. Eleanor turned to Liam, her eyes pleading. Liam, honey, you're not really going to let them do this to me, are you? Liam looked at her for a long, hard second. Then he smiled, a cold, unforgiving smile that sent a shiver down my spine. You did this to yourself, Eleanor. Eleanor let out a strangled sob, her composure finally shattering. Liam, please. But Liam just shrugged, his face devoid of emotion. Enjoy your new vacation, Eleanor, he said, his voice dripping with sarcasm. It might not be a cruise, but I hear jail cells have a lovely view. Eleanor's face crumpled, and in that moment, I knew she finally understood the gravity of her actions. She had lost. Completely and utterly. Eleanor stood there, frozen, her face drained of color, her hands shaking at her sides. She had lost control of the situation, and she knew it. Oh, come on, she scoffed, forcing a laugh that sounded hollow and desperate. This is ridiculous. Are you really going to ruin your wedding day over a little misunderstanding? I had had enough. I took a step forward, my voice shaking, but not from fear, from rage. A misunderstanding? I spat, the word dripping with venom. You stole from us. You took our honeymoon money, spent it on yourself, and then tried to commit bank fraud in front of 50 witnesses. That's not a misunderstanding. That's a crime. Eleanor's fake smile twitched, threatening to shatter completely. But I wasn't finished. You keep acting like we owe you something, I continued, my voice rising. Like your son's money, our money belongs to you. But guess what, Eleanor? The first tilted my head, my eyes burning into hers. It doesn't. A few guests clapped, their support emboldening me. Eleanor snapped her head around, glaring at the people who dared to defy her. But she wasn't just losing control of the night. She was losing control of her son. Liam folded his arms, his expression unreadable. You know what, Eleanor? He said, letting out a sharp breath. This is actually the perfect time to tell you something I've been holding back for a while. Eleanor stiffened, her eyes narrowed with suspicion. Tell me what? Liam didn't look away. I've been done with you for a long time. Eleanor's eyes bulged, her mouth agape. You don't mean that." Liam's voice was firm, unwavering. "I do," Eleanor gasped, as if he had physically struck her. The room was silent, everyone watching, waiting to see how this would end. Liam turned to me, took my hand, and kissed my fingers, his eyes filled with love and apology. Then he faced Eleanor again, his face hardening. "You took our money," he said, his voice cold and precise. "So now I'm taking something from you." Eleanor swallowed hard, her Adam's apple bobbing nervously. You don't have a son anymore." A few people audibly gasped, shocked by the brutality of his words. Eleanor's entire body shook, her face contorted with disbelief. "You don't mean that," she whispered, her voice cracking. Liam didn't flinch. "I do. After tonight, I want nothing to do with you. No calls, no visits, no texts. If you ever try to contact me or my wife again, I'll file a restraining order." Eleanor's breath came out in short, panicked gasps. No, Liam. You can't do this. I'm your mother. I raised you." Liam's expression hardened, his eyes filled with a cold, unwavering judgment. "And you just showed me exactly what kind of mother you are," Eleanor cracked. Her face twisted, her body trembling, and then, like a child throwing a tantrum, she screamed. A full-on, blood-curdling scream that echoed through the room, sending shivers down my spine. She stomped her foot, her entire body shaking with impotent rage. "You ungrateful little—" Liam grabbed my hand, his grip firm and reassuring. He turned away from her, his face a mask of controlled anger. "Come on, babe," he said, his voice low and urgent. "Let's go enjoy the rest of our wedding." And just like that, we left her standing there, humiliated, exposed, and completely alone. But the best part? The revenge wasn't over. Not by a long shot. The following morning, the fallout began. The satisfying, beautiful, utterly deserved fallout. The bank, bless their little regulatory hearts, reversed the transactions. Every single dollar Eleanor had stolen was put right back into our accounts. Her luxury car deposit? Cancelled. Her cruise? Gone. Her accounts were frozen because of the fraud report, her own bank having flagged her for suspicious activity. She couldn't touch her money for weeks while they investigated. Let her stew in her own greedy juices. She got a visit from the police. Turns out, banks do take fraud pretty seriously. She wasn't arrested yet, but she was formally warned that any further financial theft would result in charges. The look on her face when she saw those officers at her door, I'd pay good money to see that again. But it wasn't just the legal ramifications. Oh no, the social consequences were even sweeter. Eleanor became a social pariah. Word spread fast through the family and community. People cut her off. Friends stopped talking to her. Even some of her own relatives disowned her. Her little reign of terror was officially over. But the final blow? The ultimate revenge? Her worst nightmare? 3 months later, Liam and I finally went on our honeymoon. A fully upgraded first-class trip to Greece, paid for entirely by the wedding guests who despised Eleanor so much that they sent us extra money just to spite her. Santorini, Mykonos, Athens. We explored ancient ruins, swam in crystal-clear waters, and indulged in delicious food and wine. Every moment was perfect, a testament to our resilience, our love, and our ability to overcome Eleanor's toxic influence. And, of course, we posted photos. Lots of them. Sun-drenched selfies, romantic dinners, breathtaking sunsets. Every picture a deliberate jab at Eleanor's wounded ego. According to one of Liam's distant cousins, who still maintained contact with Eleanor, she cried about it for weeks. Cried about the life she had tried to destroy, the happiness she had tried to steal. Eleanor lost everything that day. Her son, her reputation, her control. And the best part? She did it all to herself. Liam and I, on the other hand, we've never been happier. We're building a life free from her toxicity, a life filled with love, laughter, and unwavering support. We have zero regrets, because at the end of the day, the best revenge is living well. And Eleanor? She'll have to live with the consequences of her own actions forever.